All right, it's 7 o'clock. I'll call this meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order. And the purpose of the meeting is to hold a hearing for the CMRPC on the Community Development Block Grant status update. So, form of the Board of Selectmen present. I will open the hearing and turn it over to Ian and Ashley to conduct the meeting, and the meeting will adjourn upon the closing of the hearing. So Ian, this is entirely your meeting. The Board of Selectmen will take up no other business this evening.
Too much on there, and
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. So thank you for joining me this evening for the performance hearing of North Brookfield's FY19 Community Development Block Grant Program. This is a required public forum to have approximately 75 to 80% of the way through the grant process. And so I'm just going to share my screen with a couple of.
Today I've offered you hand-seared coffee with candy bacon production. Today's exhaust.
All right, I'm going to share my screen so there's some information. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so this would be a handout that we would be presenting, or that we'd be giving out to everybody in person during normal times. So, but I'm just sort of going to go through sort of the 4 different parts of this. So just sort of background information for everybody who's not aware of the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG program. It is a federal program that provides funds to states, who will then provide them to communities in a competitive application process to help improve the develop community areas where there are needs, where of various types, provide social services, really just to help communities that don't really have the funding to implement a lot of different services and a lot of different goals. So in 2019, the town of North Brookfield was awarded $600,000 through this program for 2 specific projects. And I'm going to get into both of those projects now. The first one, and sort of the biggest of the share of the 600,000 is the housing rehabilitation program. What this is doing is, providing a variety of home repairs for residents that are low to moderate income, that meet a certain or under a certain threshold that is set by the Housing and Urban Development Department, so to make necessary repairs of various types to get houses up to code. These can include, as we say here, roof repairs, window replacements, septic systems, sewer connections, various types, lead abatement if necessary, to make sure that these residents can remain in their homes safely for a longer period of time, to help retain sort of home ownership in North Brookfield. It is structured in a way of a 15-year forgivable loan period, where you don't have to pay anything, and if you remain in your home for 15 years, that is completely forgiven. If not, you repay it back to the state under a depreciating amount, depending on when you would sell your home. We had budgeted for about 12 homes, and currently there's 10 projects that are underway in various states under contract, under bid, with certain vendors that can provide the actual, with various contractors. This year has been particularly challenging, just because with COVID and contractors not wanting to go into homes, or people not feeling safe having contractors coming in homes, and having to deal with all of those situations. There's also been some issues with some bids coming in a bit higher than what we would like to see, so we've had to rebid. So the process has been a bit slow, but work is continuing to go underway with a lot of these. We have about, we have 10 projects with maybe one or two more that can be funded through this. We are working with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, which is the similar regional planning agency based out of Springfield that has a dedicated housing rehabilitation team. And they are doing sort of the day-to-day, working with the clients, working with the town to set everything up and trying to get contractors out into the town to make those necessary repairs. And as you see on the screen, we have budgeted about $404,000 for this program. The second project, which has been more involved with CMRPC, is that should say the West Side Infrastructure Plan. Sorry. So we are working with Leonard Engineering to develop sort of a study of an area of the North Brookfield's downtown area that's sort of west of North Main Street, bounded by High Street, Mount Pleasant, Spring Street, to look at the infrastructure that's in place. So looking at the sewer, water connections, the roads, the sidewalks, taking into account everything that, what current state is, what could be improved, and then developing up a plan of, 5 to 6 projects that could realistically be pursued under, CDBG or various other grants or by the town itself. Leonard Engineering has been great about sort of trying to get the field work done in a timely manner and a safe manner so that we're not, we've had to change a couple of ways that they conduct field assessments in order to not, for the safety of the residents, given the trying times that we're in. They are currently working on finalizing the plan. It should be, the plan should be done by the end of this month or early next month. So we will be issuing another sort of public meeting to go over the contents of the plans, go over the contents of the proposed projects, take into account more citizen feedback. We did a preliminary one back in December, and to get some public feedback for the residents in that neighborhood on the types of work or the types of issues that they're experiencing, so that we can make sure that we try to include those in the plan as best as possible. And once the draft plan is available, it will be posted publicly for public comment, for public reading. It we'll have that second forum with the selectmen to go over the projects, take into more feedback, and possibly vote to approve the plan. And sort of then what would happen for next steps after this plan is created is that we would take one or two of those plans or one or two of those projects that have been listed, and then actually apply for additional CDBG funds to do the design of them and possibly construction in 1 year or over 2 years, depending on the size of the project. But this is, in order to make really necessary improvements to the infrastructure so that, it continues to be a safe neighborhood with, walkable sidewalks, streets that don't have potholes in them, so it's safe for the cars and safe for everybody else who are using them. And then making sure that, we have water and sewer connections that are reliable, that aren't broken, that aren't flooding people's basements, and that we, take everything into account there. So those are sort of the two projects that we are working on this year as part of the FY19 grant. And, as I said, the infrastructure plan is mostly completed. The housing rehabilitation is going to take some more time. And so what our next steps are in this plan is that we will be applying for an extension for roughly 6 months in order to allow some more time for the housing rehabilitation program to go through. So that will require a vote by the Board of Selectmen to approve the extension so we can process that through the state. I expect that I will be getting that to Ashley and to the selectmen later this week so that they can vote on it at their next meeting or next available time slot. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. We can come back to it if necessary, but now is the point that I want to sort of open it up for public comment, for questions from the board, from anybody who is sort of listening. Just sort of what your thoughts are, if you've been involved, if you live in the West Side neighborhood, or if you've been involved in housing rehab. I'm not going to, you don't have to say anything, but just any, general comments or questions from the town. And so I can sort of answer them and make sure that, everybody is on the same page with this program and everybody has all the information that they need. So I will open it up for, public comments and ask away.
Ashley, I had emailed you a set of questions. Have those been discussed?
I believe Bruce, I believe Ashley sent me over those questions as well, if those the ones that I'm thinking of. And I apologize that fell off my radar. I will write this down and I will get back to you tomorrow regarding those. Sorry again. I saw the email. I had started to draft up the response and then something happened and it slipped my mind, but I will address it so that we can move forward with that.
Sure. Okay. I just had some basic questions about it because I want to be able to, help as a community person, right, involved. So realistically, if we look at the numbers that you've thrown out there tonight, you put out good numbers. If you take the projects underway to, housing equals 404,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, 404,000. And then you take out the 131 for development. That leaves you over a balance of or actually, you have $196,000 set aside, right? And then out of that, you take 131. All right. So left over out of the whole budget, you'll wind up with maybe about $65,000. Mm-hmm. So I was curious on the 131 for the development of the plan. Is that all going to be kind of like engineering fees that Leonard?
So thank you for bringing that to my attention. One, and I've, need to mention that as well. So the fees that we're paying Leonard Engineering actually are, it ended up being a little less, so that we have about $6,300 left on that project line item. I think it was like $124,000 that we ended up agreeing in the contract with Leonard Engineering. So that money will need to be sort of reprogrammed elsewhere. The easiest thing for that to do, because I don't think that we'll be able to sort of design a project under that amount of money, is to sort of repurpose that into the housing rehabilitation side. But I think that's something, we can have I'll need to have a conversation with the board to sort of decide what to do with that remaining funds so that we can make sure to get that set aside elsewhere. Unfortunately, I can't vote on it tonight. We did not post it in the public hearing to vote on the remaining funds. So I will have to work with Ashley to put that on a agenda item. But so if you take those two numbers combined, there's about $60,000 left in the $600,000. And that money is for CMRPC and for Pioneer Valley Planning Commission for the project management of everything. So from the day to day, because there are a lot of reporting requirements and invoicing and working, as a mediator between the towns. So that sort of funds are set aside for the project management aspect of it. But we are definitely looking for the next round of applications, should the town be available, to pursue a design of that. So that's sort of my priority for the next round of applications when the town is available to apply is taking one or two of those really important projects. And I know that your area is particularly prone to issues. And so we want to make sure that, hopefully that's one of the projects that is highlighted in the plan. And so we can sort of try to pursue something.
Well, yeah, and don't get me wrong. I'm not just pushing my agenda. I do have an agenda. I got to be honest. But on the other hand, I'm willing to work with whatever group, or groups we need to work with, to see that the town benefits from improvements. Both in functionality and sanitary and safety, right?
Mhm.
So I just want to kind of understand. I'm not sure if I'm losing you. I just had my screen went away. I just want to make sure I understand the finances that are involved here, and out of that out of the $600,000 we take out out of that budgeted items of 404,000 leaves us with 196,000, right? If we take away from the 196,000 a budget of 131 for project management and whatnot, which you said actually reduces down to 124,000, we're looking at about $72,000 left over for other development costs. That is, for managing the projects. So essentially, as long as we know those numbers, then we can start to understand how the project's going to be funded. But my question to all of that is, all right, so once we go through, or once we get up to the point of spending that additional $72,000, and let's say the bulk of that gets chewed up by development and planned development costs by Leonard, right?
Mhm.
Then we have to go looking for money to do the other things, like, fix the waste, the stormwater, fix the wastewater, fix the streets and the sidewalks. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, so, I think it's important to understand that part of the project for me, okay, as well as everybody else. And, where we are once we have expended that $72,000 is we've gotten some housing work done, but we really haven't got any infrastructure as far as town utility goes taken care of. Is that a good assumption?
Yes. So, we haven't made the improvements yet. This is really just sort of that first step in ensuring that, we've identified here's where it will make the best sense to make those improvements so that we can then apply for the planning, which is a pretty easy next step, and then the construction. So it's sort of it's a process to get all the improvements, which, I wish it was faster than what it is, but that's sort of, where we're at. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that gives me a good understanding of it. And you know what? For those of the residents in this part of the town that are on this meeting, I'm hoping that we can get together and work as a team to help get things done for the town that need to be done. The only other thing I had is, and this is probably going to wait for later, I mean, not a problem. The questions I had were, resolved to ask were about what the priorities were going to be, because obviously going to my agenda, I got a stormwater problem, right? It doesn't make any sense to put down a new roadway, all right, and then go back and say, okay, 2 years later, rip up the street to do stormwater, or go back and rip up the street to do sewerage. And then also there's a logical way of doing streets and sidewalks too. So I just wanted to make sure that, people are aware of those parts of the projects and what the costs are going to be. Now,
Mhm.
the $400,004, is that going to take care of, is that sufficient to take care of those 12 homes that have to be renovated and rehabbed?
Yes, because, usually we're looking at costs about, I think we said about 35,000 per unit. So it's, because when we get into it, but then again, it's various needs for each of the homes, and so the total amount will change. But that's why I'm going to sort of recommend we take that $6,000 that's sort of left over on the infrastructure line item and move it over to the housing rehab. Not only will that will that allow for some of those additional funds for these projects that are slightly over budget, that are the bids that are coming in slightly higher than what we had anticipated, but it would also, it's an easier process. It just requires a vote by the select board and not another public hearing. But that's just my own. And I did see in the chat from somebody asking if this area does include Union Street. It does. Union Street is included in the infrastructure plan area.
Yeah,
And so
it actually goes down and it's actually bounded by, is it Spring Street or?
it is, I'm looking at a map now. It's Spring Street, Prospect Street, Summer, High, Mount Pleasant. And then there's a bit of Bell Street that is also included in the.
Can I ask what the timeline is for this project?
So the timeline, so we'll have the plan done end of March, early April. We are working to see if the town will be eligible to apply this year for the next round of next CDBG round. They do have a requirement that at least 80% of the current grant is spent out. They might change that this year due to COVID. We have to wait and see. So the town might be able to apply this year. If not, they will be able to apply next year. And we are going to try to see if we can do both planning and construction at the same time. That will depend on the complexity of the projects. And, speaking as what Bruce had mentioned, when we're looking at these infrastructure projects, we're looking, not only to do road, but maybe, it's a matter of ripping up the road, changing all the utilities, putting down new roads. So we're attacking both things at a time. So it's comprehensive. So we're not looking at just sort of surface repaving and then saying there we're done, but they're looking at sort of road top down to see, that project will include everything. But the timeline, it's a little frustrating of a timeline because of some of these requirements that are listed, but we're working to sort of get everything sort of squared away as quickly as possible. And there also could be other grants that could benefit from this. So if we want to sort of an accelerated timeline, there are other infrastructure programs out there that, we might be able to attack one project that might not be feasible under CDBG, but could be feasible under another grant program. And so, we have these plans on file, and we can always sort of refer to them, and I can always help the town on maybe a non-CDBG infrastructure project in order to get some of the improvements underway.
Thanks. Sounds like a lot of awesome hard work you guys are doing.
Yeah, Leonard Engineering has been really good about sort of making sure that everything is included that needs to be included. And I haven't seen what the report looks like yet, but I will be looking at it once we get underway, or once the final product is available for the public comment. And we'll make sure that everybody has a chance to review it. They can be a bit technical and a bit laborious, but we'll make sure that it's posted on the website and available.
When will that be available?
Sorry, say that again.
When would that be available?
All I've been told is by the end of this month. I think they're really in the final stretch of putting it together. And because my contact at Leonard Engineering said that, we should be good for the second public hearing end of March, early April. So it should be any day that we get the plan. Are there any other comments or questions?
Yes, can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
When you put this whole project together, it's probably going to take years, and there's a sequence to it. What I'd like to know from either you or the select board is how are the utilities going to play into this, i.e. water, sewer, highway department?
Mm-hmm.
Do they just back away saying, if we got a blocked sewer line or something, we're going to fix it when this whole project is done? Or do they have any responsibility for existing problems?
So I can speak to part of that. When we are developing these projects and developing the priorities of which projects we want to undertake, we do engage with the highway department, water, sewer departments. We try to get all of their feedback, because maybe they've got something that they're already planning on working on. And so we don't want to sort of try to, say that they are going to be making improvements to Union Street that's already on their capital plan. Maybe then we're not going to suggest to do a project at Union Street. So we take into account what their needs are, what they're planning already. But in terms of sort of existing problems, if something does come up, then I would expect that they would be handling that on their own. But we, as part of this project, also sort of want to tie in some of the work that they're doing in order to sort of piggyback off of it as well. So if it's just a matter of talking to them and coordinating accordingly.
What my question is primarily is town management is a pie cutting operation. And if a department can say, we're going to let it ride for 3, 4, 5 years for this project, is that an acceptable strategy?
I don't want to speak for town management or the department heads. So I don't know what their thought process is on that.
For example, we know that there's sewer lines that are blocked from tree root systems that could be fixed immediately. Is that a thing that would be considered part of a 5-year away project to root the sewer lines?
I would say, if the need is immediate, definitely they should address it more immediately. But I think that's something that they looked into in their field work. Leonard Engineering did to see sort of where the blockages are, and that can be identified in the plan accordingly. And maybe it's not a project, but it's something that has been sort of identified in the plan, so that when we give the finished product to the various department heads, if they see something that says, oh, look, there are tree roots that are clogging up the sewer lines here, and here, maybe then they have a better idea to sort of address that more immediately.
Let me ask about another example then, and maybe this is already water over the dam. I think within the past year or a couple of years, the probably electrical and telephone replaced poles up and down North Main Street on the border of this area. Many of those poles are sitting right dead center in the middle of the sidewalk, so the people from the housing for the elderly in their wheelchairs cannot make it down the sidewalk, which is by law required to have them access the sidewalk. So now we have people, running down the middle of the highway along with the cars. That was certainly a lack of foresight on previous select boards, to allow that to happen. And I just, I don't have any specifics on this particular project, but you certainly don't want the town to go to hell for 4 or 5 years while somebody's waiting for a project to come through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, the plan does not, and yeah, I know wasn't part of your question or anything, but the plan doesn't cover North Main Street. It has to cover primarily residential areas. So they did not look at the sidewalks along North Main Street. To my knowledge, I could be wrong on that, but to my knowledge, they did not look at the sidewalks there. But, when going under these projects, planning all of these, we would be taking into account all of those different various ADA requirements and ensuring that we're not putting in, any utilities that might, or anything that might block a sidewalk. So that is always taken into account with these projects. Does that answer your your question or your comment? Does that address it?
Yeah, I understand that North Main Street isn't part of it. That was a past boondoggle. I mean, that we brought that up when it was occurring, and just nobody wanted to take responsibility for that. So, the power company just dropped them in the middle of the streets. And the highway department flinched on it, saying they didn't want to ask people for land taking to widen the sidewalks and stuff like that. It's easy for departments to look the other way with problems and just say it's going to be solved someday with a mega project like this. And I know there's some water problems within this boundary that could be fixed immediately.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is it's going to be prolonged until it comes up in the tick list on this project. And I would prefer the town to act responsible rather than wait and make it somebody else's problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's, realistically, Jim, and I totally agree. There are some other issues like that, and all of those need to be brought to selectmen. That is, to bring it to Ian at this point, that's outside of his realm, right? Ian's like project management, if I got that right. Mm-hmm. But these are questions. these are more immediate and more urgent questions that you have, Jim, are ones for us selectmen. And as I've been working on my particular agenda, with the help of neighbors and everything else, and then with the selectmen, we're trying to get through that part of it with them for the annual meeting. But I'm concerned too that a lot of the problems that I have, like the problems you have, are going to get put aside and said, okay, well, we got this going on. And by no shape of the imagination do I expect any money out of this grant to come, to come into play to actually do the remedial action necessary for water. Whether it's sewerage or whether it's stormwater, or whether it's sidewalks. Sidewalks and streets are, on this side are a little bit rough.
Well, last time I asked the question about the sewer department. The sewer department has a project that's worth about $5 million to fix the some requirement from the feds. But the sewer department is getting 11 million or 12 million or 13, something like that. And when I asked, well, what's the rest of the money going to be used for? There was really a non-answer, that it was all for, like 12 million was to cover the 5 million that's required. And maybe aside from this particular project, I would think that it would be of value for the town fathers to maybe put on programs from each one of these respective departments, water, sewer, highway, and whatever else utility would cover it, and just present to the town what those departments' plans are. So we can get a feel for not having to accuse them of doing some shady deal or not having a project being completed. So it's a communication problem, and it's probably beyond the scope of your project here. But we don't want potholes left on High and on Pleasant Street because the highway department's waiting for 4 or 5 years to repave it. And that's a poor example, but that's sort of.
No, there'll definitely be opportunities for the various departments to sort of take up some of these projects on their own. It's not a requirement that only grants, the CDBG be used for these projects, but maybe we'll take one big project to do the initial planning and construction on it using CDBG funds, and then some of the smaller projects the town might be able to take up on their own. Depending on what their capital budgets are and what their other sort of capital projects that they have planned. But this is something that we'll definitely stay in contact with the various department heads as we move forward to see sort of, what they've done, what they will plan to do. We did a similar study about 5 years ago for the east side of North Main Street, and the highway department actually ended up doing one of the projects on their own. So that's just sort of, at least we give them some of the information that they have so they know exactly what all the problems are and where, what the possible solutions are and what the possible budgets might end up being, because that's something that the engineers also will sort of estimate is what the estimated project cost will be, so that the departments have an idea of what is feasible to sort of attack on their own. All right. Are there any additional questions?
I'm pretty well set. I think, we know the next meeting would be one in which is the summary, the
Yes.
reports are going to be shared with everybody.
Yes. So the next meeting of the infrastructure plan is when the engineer will sort of showcase the final product, what some of the projects, or what the projects that they've identified are, take into account any additional final community input. And then if there's nothing substantial, then I believe the board of selectmen would then vote on it. And so that is something that I will be looking to schedule at some point in the end of March, early April. So just sort of be on the lookout for that. And I'll be in contact with Ashley in order to set that up for a selectmen's meeting, which will be in person. Unless something changes.
I think, Ashley, when we go to that point with the further hearing, can we make arrangements to do that as a part of Zoom too, or because this format works great if you want to stay away from people.
Yeah, I can talk to the selectmen and try to make that happen. Last time we did a hearing, it was on Zoom, so I don't think it will be a problem to have it on Zoom again. We'd like to get as many, public comments as we can, and this seems to be the most convenient way for most people, so I think it should be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if there's no other comments, I believe we can close this public hearing. Ashley, John, if you want, is there any formal thing that we need to do?
No, as long as, if the hearing's closed, then Dale had announced at the beginning of the meeting that the meeting would adjourn at the closing of the hearing. So if you're all set, then we're all set.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining. And again, be on the lookout for some news. We'll try to post it on the website and Facebook or however, whatever communication methods that the town has. And I look forward to seeing many of you again when it comes time for the second public hearing for the infrastructure plan to sort of help close out that project.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you,
Have a
Ian.
great evening, everybody.